Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Score, sports podcast dedicated to bringing you news, scores, and all happenings around the sports world. Another great thing I'm doing is giving a shout out to great small businesses. We know they are struggling right now, and I thought I could provide a great thing by giving a shout out. So if anybody knows any great businesses, let me know and I'll give them a shout out in these podcasts. I'm not receiving any monetary compensation and have no sponsors for this podcast. First, I'd like to talk about the introductory to Behind the Score, and then lead into talking about the PBR, NHL, MLB, NBA, and the NFL. So let's get started. Listen to adventures to build a sports fan page, fan group, and podcast. One thing I always was watching podcasts, I never noticed any that really had fan interaction. So I think that's one thing I can hit on to make this one unique from the rest. What got me into this was watching Joe Rogan's podcast, and I always enjoyed watching the podcast. And then one day I thought to myself, well, seeing I enjoy watching them so much, why don't I get started in one? So first thing I had to do is think of something that I not only knew something about, but something that really intrigued me, and that was sports. So I decided to start this up and give it a try. I'm going to predominantly be on Facebook, but I've also started Instagram, a YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing some videos for TikTok as well. Then as we lead into the PBR, talk about the riders in the standings right now. Coming out of Brazil, number 1, Junior Patrick Sousa. Also coming out of Brazil, number 2, Mauricio Gala Moreira. Also third, for Brazil, coming out of Brazil, Keiki Pacheco. Fourth, we have coming out of the USA, Cooper Davis. And fifth, coming out of the USA, is Cole Melicon. Some big names that you might notice around the PBR would be J.B. Mooney, Chase Outlaw, Derek Kolbaba, which I met at the Stampede there a couple of years ago, Jess Lockwood, which also broke his jaw in the first week of competition 2 weeks ago, and Jose Vitor Leme, the champion from last season. Should be a great season going into this. Some of the bulls to be watching and look out for, and number 1 would be Riding Solo. Next, we got an 11-year-old bull, 2-time champion back-to-back. He will buck you off smoother than a baby's bottom. That's right, we got Smooth Operator. Next and third, we have Detroit Lean, followed by fourth, Marquise Metal, I'm Legit Too, and Young Man's Blues. Another one that recognize his name and is really cool would be Bill the Butcher. As we head into the second competition in Okeechobee, Florida today, it actually started at 2 p.m. Eastern, so the standings should be rolling in at any point there. Another thing with the PBR this season is every day is going to have a winner. It's to be able to hand out more points and make it more competitive for the end of the season. They have the World Cup coming up soon. It should be a drive normally to the mid-season big event, which is the Calgary Stampede. That's an invitational one for the PBR riders. And then it leads up to the end of the year. They're the Grand Prize, the biggest buckle of them all. Should be big this year, and might see some new riders in it with be the PBR World Finals. Next, head into the NHL. A lot of things going on there right now. The score last night was Columbus over Chicago 2-1. Today we have a game that just finished up, the afternoon game in a shootout. The Sabres topping the Devils 4-3. Tonight we have the 7-2 Maple Leafs taking on the 3-6 Oilers. That should be an interesting matchup. My Chicago Blackhawks actually eliminated the Oilers in the playoffs last season. Penguins at 4-3-1 take on the Rangers at a disappointing start to their season at 2-4-1. The Islanders 3-4 with kind of a weird standing for them. And because with Varlamov there, he started out the season with 2 shutouts, and in the third game he only let in 1 goal. So he was 3-0 in the season to start against the Flyers and Carter Hart with 5-2-1. Big matchup tonight would be the Bruins versus the Capitals. As we all know, Zdeno Chara went from the Bruins to the Capitals, so that should add some intrigue to the game tonight. According to Yahoo Fantasy Sports, for the Capitals, Ovechkin is a game-time decision, and came out with the news that Pasternak could be joining the game tonight. He started out the season on the IR. But he should be back from his surgery that he had last season. The Stars, they started their late season. They're at 4-0 going against the Hurricanes at 3-1. The Predators at 4-3 are taking on the Lightning at 3-1-1. The Panthers at 3-0-1 taking on the Red Wings at 2-5-1. The Flames at 2-3-1, which is kind of disappointing for that team, as they've got Markstrom in the offseason, and they were slated to be a team that would be competing this year, but they're off to a slow start. A great start for the month against the Canadiens, which have a great start at 5-0-2. Avalanche, which are heavy favorites to win the Stanley Cup this season, at 5-3, go against the Wild at 5-3 also. So that should be a good matchup tonight. The Blues at 4-2-1 are playing the Ducks at 3-3-2. The Canucks, devastated to lose Markstrom in the offseason, but with restraints there when it came to the cap, moves had to happen, and they decided to go with Demko, and Markstrom went to Calgary. They take on the Jets at 5-2, and that'll be at 10 o'clock tonight. Let's go into the standings now. In the North Division, Toronto tops that one at 7-2. Was projected to either be first or second in the division this year. Montreal, like you said, off to a great start at 5-0-2. Winnipeg 5-2-0. Then we have Vancouver, which is 5-5-0. Edmonton off to a disastrous start. They've only got 6 points in their first 9 games. They were projected to be 1 or 2 in the standings, so they're hoping to be able to get a kickstart and get that going here soon. Calgary is in 6th in the division at 2-3-1, and the Ottawa Senators round out the division at 1-6-1 with their big win coming over the Leafs there. That was a surprise. Ottawa, I think, is going to be a team. I was talking to my friend this week that they were going to be a team that if you get caught flat-footed, they could definitely beat you. They're a young team with a young core, and with Stetzel on that team right now, that team could become unstoppable and even push for the playoffs in the next year or two. We'll move on to the East, where Washington tops that division at 5-0-3. Boston in second at 5-1-1. Through 8 games, we got Philadelphia at 5-2-1. I figured they would get top spot in the division. That's a great young team as well with a great goaltender. Carter Hart, the last few games, has struggled a bit against the Boston Bruins, but I have a feeling that he's going to bounce back in a big way and challenge definitely for that top spot in that division. Buffalo is next at 4-3-2. Pittsburgh is in fifth with 4-3-1. Pittsburgh, it was reported Jim Rutherford, a lot of the information I get for this or any of the sports come from their websites, so PBR.com, NHL.com, all the sport, like MLB.com, NFL.com, NBA.com. I'm going to have a thing coming up from CBS Sports, so I'm going to try to make sure I get all those in there, as it's great to make sure you put where you're getting your information from. New Jersey Devils, they're in sixth in that division at 3-3-2. That's a team that's been disappointing over the last couple seasons. They picked up PK Subban. That didn't quite work out. Him and breaking up with Lindsey Vonn also. So that guy's going through a tough time right now. His career has taken quite a bit of a slide. So we'll see how that team does this year. In seventh place, which I think would also be playing for the top, especially with how quick Varlamov started with his 2 shutouts and 3 wins in his first 3 starts. It looked off like they were off to a roll. Now the team is sitting at 3-4. It's 7th in the division. New York Rangers, which is the biggest surprising. A great young core there. They got Lafreniere in the first overall in the draft. I figured they would be making a big, huge push this year, but they find themselves in the bottom of the division at 2-4-1 through their first seven games. Next we'll go to the West with Vegas topping that division at 5-1-1. Colorado next to number 2, which is projected as not only the Stanley Cup favorite, but the favorite to even win the division in a large way. Through their 8 games, are 5-3-0. Minnesota tied with Colorado for second in the division, also at 5-3. St. Louis, which is out to not a bad start, but definitely not sitting where they would like to be. Through their first 7 games at 4-2-1. LA Kings kind of making a push to get back into the playoffs. They're an older team that I figured would be starting a rebuild, but find themselves still trying to compete for one of those playoff spots. Next, we got Anaheim, also tied with LA at 3-3-2. Arizona comes in at 7th at 3-4-1. That's a team that was projected to be in the playoffs. Maybe just on a bubble spot, but definitely in the hunt for that right there. San Jose rounds out that division, losing Joe Thornton in the offseason to Toronto, and they're sitting at 3-5-0 through their first 8 games. Moving on to the Central, where my favorite team is. There's a few new teams on this division this year with a new realignment. Columbus topping that division at 4-2-3 through their first 9 games. Dallas, they got a late start to the season because of COVID. Jumped out to a great start in 4 games at 4-0. Nashville in at number 3 at 4-3. Florida in at 3-0-1 through their first 4 games because of cancellations of COVID. Tampa Bay has had some postponements. They're off to a great start though at 3-1-1. Chicago through 9 games, my favorite team. We're in a rebuild right now. We're missing Jonathan Toews and Kirby Dach. So it was projected that we probably wouldn't be doing that well, probably near the bottom of the league this year. But we're off with a 2-4-3 record for 7 points through 9 games. Carolina, which is kind of surprising with how much of a playoff push they've been making the last few years, find themselves at 3-1 to 7th in the division. But the great thing is they've also been hit with COVID. So even though it looks like a disastrous start being in 7th, they've also only played 4 games and got 6 points. So we should see as the games go on here, we should see the divisions kind of start to look the way people had projected once they start playing some more games. And Detroit, which is projected to be near the bottom as they're rebuilding their team and getting their young core together. It was also a part of Jimmy Howard had retired. I seen that on Facebook this week. It was 2-5-1 with 5 points through 8 games. But I think tonight's matchup definitely ones to be looking at would definitely be the Capitals versus the Bruins. Interesting to see the Stars versus the Hurricanes. Started 4-0 and 3-1 for the Hurricanes. That should be a good one. Flyers and Islanders to see what happens with Varlamov and Carter Hart there. That should be an interesting matchup. Rangers seeing if they can rebound while the Penguins try to keep themselves where they are in the standings. That should be a great game. But the Maple Leafs and the Oilers, the Maple Leafs have definitely got through a few of their games. Definitely with the luck side, winning in overtime against Montreal and picking up a few key wins. So that's a team that definitely their record could be a whole lot more different had it swung the other way. So now we'll move on to MLB and look at some of the trades and things going on this off season. Some big news. Leaving the Houston Astros as a free agent and signing a 6-year, $150 million contract is with the Toronto Blue Jays. One of the biggest signings with my favorite Blue Jays. We get a dedicated and experienced center fielder. That's something we've been lacking in the outfield. Gives us definitely some room to move some players around and utilize them in different spots when people need rest days. Hernandez is a big person for the DH role, so he'll have less time he'll have to play in the outfield. There's also definitely could be some more trades and players moving around, so we definitely can't get too far on ourselves with that one until we see how everything plays out. JT Realmuto announced recently he will be headed back to the Phillies for $115 million. Third is Trevor Bauer, starting pitcher there. It sounds like his market is coming to a close. Mets put out a big offer there. So it should be interesting to see how his contract goes. I've always seen him as a bit of a wild card. I think it would have been great if the Jays could have got him. I think at the end of the day, the money just won't be there. But he's definitely a wild card. As we all know, if you know stories there, in Cleveland, he was going to get pulled in the one game. He wasn't happy with that and pitched the ball over the center field wall. Uh, then he got moved to the Reds where he was playing really well. So definitely see whether his contract will be overpaying him or whether he will be able to show the brilliance that he is as a pitcher and stay out of trouble and be a good addition to the team that he goes to. DJ LeMahieu, which was reported and looked like a disgruntled negotiation with the Yankees. Finally, he got to the point he started up getting his agent to contact other teams that were interested. Shortly after that, it was announced a $90 million deal for 6 years. It was supposedly to bring financial allowance there throughout the years to put towards building the team in other respects. So he definitely got a money term there to return to the Yankees. Marcus Stroman accepted the qualifying offer to stay with the Mets this season. Marcell Ozuna, he's been kind of the quiet one atop of the leaderboard for free agents, but I think he definitely won't have a hard time finding a spot to play this season. He did very well for the Braves last year. He knows how to hit home runs, so that should definitely work out somewhere there. Justin Turner, which really hasn't been discussed all that much. Some had reported him to go back to the Dodgers. There was talks that the Jays might have been interested at the beginning, but the signing of Marcus Semien to a 1-year, $18 million deal kind of shows that that might be a closed door now for the Jays. So I wouldn't be surprised if Turner doesn't return to the Dodgers on a contract. Michael Brantley. Now this is an interesting one. Michael Brantley played for Houston last year. Then it was announced after the Springer deal that Michael Brantley was also being discussed and shortly later announced that he also had signed with the Toronto Blue Jays. Not sure what happened there because later on that day it was announced that he was returning to the Houston Astros on a deal pending a physical. So it was kind of an interesting turn of events. Not sure how that one got started. It's not only Toronto media people were announcing that, but I also seen some articles in other places from experts that said he had gone to Toronto. So that one was kind of interesting unfolding there. Andrelton Simmons, who opted out of the rest of the season with 4 or 5 games left last season with the Angels. It was a long shot, but still had a chance to make the playoffs. And Andrelton Simmons said, nope, I'm going home. So it's no surprise to me that he's leaving the Angels and joining the Minnesota Twins next season. Masahiro Tanaka. This is kind of an interesting one as he was slated to be in the second tier of starting pitchers that were available on the market. Not sure what happened there, but he is definitely going back to Japan to the Rakuten Eagles. He was one guy that I thought the Jays might have been able to pick up for third or fourth rotation spot, along with James Paxton, which I haven't heard too much about, but it seems to be that somewhere along the line, at some point, that wasn't feasible either. Next would be the person I mentioned before, shortstop Marcus Semien, going from the Oakland Athletics to my favorite, the Toronto Blue Jays. He signed there on a 1 year, $18 million deal. Expected to possibly slate in at second base, which with splitting time with Biggio. It was said that he was going to move over there, but also could split time with Bichette at shortstop if Bichette needs a day off. So there's definitely some versatility there. It was expected for him to go to second as Biggio might be splitting time with Guerrero at third base. Guerrero, who has slimmed down this season, definitely looks like the way things are going now that he will be getting the start at third base to see how well he does there. To me, he actually seems more like a DH and somebody that will be a DH going forward. I think if the DH becomes a universal thing across the league, it'll be interesting to see when it comes to the DH market where people go. It opens up more options for there, which also could heat up that market for sure. Tellez we also have as a DH and splitting time at first, as well as Teoscar Hernandez. Like we got too many people really lined up for the DH spot, which was kind of what surprised me with the Brantley announcement, as he could play field and be an upgrade there. But it was also said that he might split time at DH. Like as anybody knows, especially with time off and people being slated in DH to keep their bats in the order, you have too many DH spots and all of a sudden somebody's sitting on the bench that you don't want them to be. So I think if the Brantley deal did go through, that definitely meant there was a outfielder or even a DH person leaving the team. But we'll see as it goes on. The off season is still underway. We don't see the spring training start up for another 3 to 4 weeks. So there's definitely more time for deals to be done. Next would be Jackie Bradley Jr. We should see his market heat up here, especially with the announcement of George Springer signing with the Blue Jays. He would be the next center fielder up. Joc Pederson just announced here recently that he will be leaving the Dodgers and joining the Chicago Cubs. Joc Pederson was another one I thought if we needed another outfielder, especially a corner outfielder, we could pick him up. He was competed alongside Guerrero in the home run derby last season. That was very entertaining. Nelson Cruz in his 40. He's 40. He's also a DH. He was played with the Minnesota Twins. So I could see him getting a signing here soon. I think his market will start to heat up as teams drop out of the Marcell Ozuna sweepstakes. So it shouldn't be too much longer before we start hearing more news about him. James McCann, the catcher for the Chicago White Sox, is now joined the New York Mets. He was next to Real Muto. It seemed like the Real Muto trade signing had broke down with the Mets. What he was offering obviously was too much for what they were looking for, so they decided to go with the second best option, James McCann. It sounded like they felt like he was more a fit for their team, so they locked him up. Kevin Gossman, like Marcus Stroman, accepted a qualifying offer. He goes back to the Giants. Didi Gregorius, just announced here soon, if I'm not mistaken, was a 2-year, $26 or $28 million deal. Return to the Philadelphia Phillies. It was said that if the DJ LeMahieu thing broke down for the New York Yankees, that maybe he'd end up back there on a short-term deal. But they were able to get that done, so it seems like DD decided he was going to go back to the Philadelphia Phillies. James Paxton, that I talked about a bit earlier, he's 32. He was supposed to have a throwing session, but I really haven't heard much about him over the last little while, which is kind of surprising. I thought teams that were looking for stretch for two, but even a third or fourth rotation spot would have been looking at him. I know he was linked to the Toronto Blue Jays. I think he would work out and be a low risk option for a 3 or 4 spot in the rotation, but we'll wait to see what happens there. Colton Wong, I seen an article, I think it was MLB.com, who played for the Cardinals, that his market apparently is heating up now. So we should maybe see a decision coming soon there. Liam Hendricks was linked to the Blue Jays as well. He went and toured the facility down in Dunedin, the revamped spring training facility. But shortly after that, it was announced he was leaving the Oakland Athletics to join the Chicago White Sox. Brad Hand, which is another one of the big closers and reliever pitchers, right behind Liam Hendricks, if not right at the same level, is left Cleveland Indians, and he's on his way to the Washington Nationals. Adam Wainwright, 39, was also in talks with the Cardinals along with Yadier Molina. It was announced that he actually is returning to the Cardinals on a deal there. Charlie Morton, that was with the Rays during the playoffs last season, has joined the Braves. Yadier Molina, that just talked about, one of the big catchers, he was linked to a few other teams. One of the big news that caught was that the Yankees apparently checked in on him. But Yadier Molina, it sounds like a reunion with the Cardinals might be the biggest possibility there. Adam Eaton, that was with the Washington Nationals, he's gone and signed himself up with the Chicago White Sox. Brett Gardner, now this is an interesting one.